Welcome back, guys. Another episode of 50K Ready, a co-host on the episode. And I've gone ups and downs with video and trying to make video podcasts. And I'm glad to have you, Steven, because we kind of know each other. So if I had to work out some kinks, I knew you'd be super, super patient with me. But yeah, no, I got a bunch of guys' episodes coming out with video guests. And I'm so happy to have Steven hop on the podcast with us tonight and co-host and help bring the conversation along. How you doing, bud?
Yeah, man, I'm excited to be on, doing well. And it's been, I think the Christmas episode of my podcast was when we chatted last. And then before that, when you were on mine. And no, it's been good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting, man.
Yeah, I always like to start and give people like kind of a background on how I met guests, because I'm fortunately small enough where I have to seek my own guests out. And it's usually the people that I've met and bumped into, which makes things really, really good. And like you mentioned, I was lucky enough to be on your podcast, the Adventure Jogger, back October 25th. It got released right before I did Javelina, and we had an amazing talk, and I knew we were going to follow up, and we've been trying to plan this now for a couple months now. And
yeah,
I will go back to anybody that did not hear that episode. I found you or learned about you from your YouTube channel, and I want to definitely talk YouTube tonight and what that business has been like. But you had an amazing channel and still do on tech gear and reviews and also race adventures. And when I first got into ultra marathon and I hopped on YouTube trying to find everybody, you just kept popping up. And then I think the first time I actually reached out to you was we sprained our ankles. We both have very glass ankles from what we've learned. And you'd sprained your ankle and I had recently done so. And I was just in the dumps, new to the sport. And you were just taking it like so well. Like I was like so beat up, and you know, you just were handling this injury. So I reached out and I was like, dude, how are you still staying positive? Is this just for the is this just for the show? And you're by nature a very positive person, which was awesome. And we got to chatting, and then I got to be on your podcast. It's been really, really awesome.
Yeah, definitely. That's unfortunately my injury history with ankle rolls is pretty extensive. So I've got a lot of experience in dealing with those, and I know they come and go, and recovery takes a little time, but you'll be back. And you've run lots of races since then, and just ran one last weekend, didn't you?
Yeah. I got a couple races that I've been doing, and a couple more coming up as I come out of that winter funk. I mean, you're in Colorado. Is it still freezing there?
No, it was like 65 today. Sunny. It was beautiful.
And you're south, right? Colorado Springs.
Yeah, Colorado Springs. That's right.
You're not originally from Colorado Springs. You're from Tennessee, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Originally, I was actually born here. I'm one of the people that can say I was a Colorado native, but we moved when I was like one. Okay. And so I spent pretty much all my life on the East Coast, either Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee.
Yeah. And what brought you? So did you come back to Colorado Springs just because you were like, I need to go back home, or what was it the mountains that drew you back here? What brought you out?
Yeah, it was 100% the mountains. I mean, I ran a 100-kilometer race in Idaho called the Beaverhead 100K. That was back in 2021, and fell in love with like high mountains, because that was a race that went up to like a little over 10,000 feet. On the Continental Divide Trail, fell in love, tried to convince my wife to move to Idaho. She's like, no way. And then we flew into Montana for that race, and Montana was pretty. So I was like, well, how about Montana? She's like, way too much snow. No way. She's like, I'll consider Colorado. I was like, oh, okay, well, cool. So we threw out some ideas, and I lived here. We had some friends that lived here from when I was in the military with them. We served together in Korea. And so they were here. We flew out for a weekend and stayed with them and did some house shopping and just fell in love. And we literally put an offer in like after that first weekend and fell in love with the place.
As somebody that selfishly, and we will talk running, but as somebody that selfishly wants to move, do you regret it in any way? Because I have like such a huge fear of the grass is always greener on the other side, if you know what I mean. And I'm afraid if I make a move, like all the things that I want to move away from, they exist everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, do you have any regrets for moving out to Colorado?
No, not at all. It's the only thing, so in Tennessee where we lived, my sister lived there, my parents lived there, my best friend, my wife's best friend, So my wife's best friend and my best friend they're married. So it was like a couple friends. We actually like all of us were great friends. And so like I really truly miss that relationship. But everything else, 100% don't miss anything about Tennessee. Maybe the no state income tax. That was pretty nice. But the weather, the humidity in Tennessee was atrocious. The tornado threat where we lived, we were very rural, and so we lost power pretty much if there was any wind blew or a storm, and so it was like just ridiculous. And our kids hated being outside in the summer because it was so miserable. It was just, there was bugs everywhere and it was humid. I know I'm painting a very bleak picture. We loved our time in Tennessee. We loved our time in Tennessee, but gosh, Colorado, dude, like the winters here, like we thought they'd be bad. They're not that bad. The snow, you might get 4, 5, 6 inches. It'll be gone in a day or two because it gets 40 degrees the next day, and then it's so sunny and you're at 6,700 feet, so it just melts quickly. Yeah. And it's great. And summer times, no humidity. It gets up to the 90s in times, and it gets hot because you're closer to the sun and it's a dry heat. But oh man, it's just, I couldn't ask for a better place to run and to live and to hike. It's just amazing.
I spent a short time in Colorado Springs a couple of years ago, and yeah, I loved. It was very different than Denver, which I knew not all Colorado was built the same, obviously, but I went down there and I had a public speaking engagement that I did for my other career, and got to go to Pikes Peak. Actually, a bunch of my buddies did the incline, but It's funny now in hindsight, I bailed on that. I mean, this was before I found ultras again, and really in my time when alcoholism was in full swing, and we were up late drinking the night before, and I was like, I have no intentions. I'm telling them, of course, like, I'm going to go. Yeah, guys, can't wait. I'm sitting there crushing New England IPAs, knowing that there is no way. And I have now such regret. I mean, I see that thing and I see you on it, and I'm like, I can't believe I had they paid for my 1 day parking or whatever. You have to get that little 1 day permit or what. And I just bailed, and I'm so mad. So it is definitely,
you got to come back out, man.
It is definitely on my list. We are coming out to Colorado in late July, but we're going up north.
Yeah, I heard your episode with your wife. I've listened to that. It's you going to is it Run Rabbit Run? No, not Run Rabbit. It's Never Summer.
Yes, right? She's doing the Never Summer 60. I think it's 60. Is it 50K or it's 50 or 60K?
I think it's a 60K.
60K. And at first, I wasn't going to do anything. But then as I looked at UTMB and I got into UTMB, I saw kind of that's really good for a peak week. So I put in the lottery or the wait list for the 100K the following day. So we'll see what happens. If not, we're going to get some adventure. But I mean, that just looking at the pictures from that race and just being out there, that's going to be an awesome, awesome experience.
It's going to be epic. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we got to speak last time, I know the brief story. You know, you ran for like a week in high school and then kind of quit.
No, it wasn't even high school. It was like elementary school or something, middle school. Yeah.
And then you went on to the military. Thank you so much for your service, as I must say. And, you know, you got out of the military and you fell into the typical, like, I'm out of the military. I'm done. I'm done with PT. I'm done.
Grew the beard.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to start crushing beers and enjoying life. What then brought you back into not even just ultra scene, but just general physical fitness in general?
Yeah. So like you said, got out of the Army, didn't want to run, didn't want to do a push up, didn't want to do anything after being told to do that every day for, 4 years. So took a lot of time, several years off. I don't think I started back running until 2017. And I got out of the Army in 2012 is when I got off of active duty. Okay. And so I don't think I started running again until maybe 2016, but definitely 2017. And had some friends that were running, and they were signed up for a relay race out in Oregon called the Cascade Lakes Relay.
Okay.
And they needed another teammate. And so I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So I started training, and that just kind of, got me hooked, and especially doing that team event like that where you're traveling. It was a 200-mile relay. We're in, vans going across Oregon through the high desert, running in 105-degree weather. But just that camaraderie that was there, it just got me hooked on the whole running scene again, and just instantly fell back in love.
Have you done any other relays like that? Because I've done the Hood to Coast in Oregon, like 109. But what's the big series? The Ragnar series. Have you?
Yep.
Have you? Because I've done Hood to Coast a few times, but I've never gotten back into what is. That's a Oh, there it is.
This is a Ragnar buckle for. This is Kentuckiana. We run Kentuckiana, I think 3 times.
Okay.
Oh, we got first place overall in the men's open ultra division. We crushed it, dude. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, I will say we'll get to crush it in a second because I know something that the audience doesn't really exactly know, or unless they've been following you and listening to your podcast. But you did this with your buddies, and then you were like, okay, I'm going to continue with this. And I'm going to continue running because it's fun. I enjoy it. I'm feeling healthy. And then how does that zag from a relay with your buddies into the ultra scene?
So yeah, I kept running, did some local like 5Ks in the small town of Jamestown. They had like something they called the pumpkin run, and it was like every October, and you'd go run like a 5K, that kind of thing. And then at some point I don't know how I found this video. I don't remember, but I remember it was Billy Yang's The Why video on his Leadville 100 race. And I watched that, and that really made me want to try trail running, because at this point I had never done any trail. It had all been road. And so I wanted to try trail. And then like this kind of also led me to find out, well, there's this whole world out there of ultra running. Like, what is this stuff? It sounds crazy. These people are nuts. And so I started running trail and just training on some trails. And I actually signed up my very first trail race, which happened to be my very first ultra marathon. I'm pretty sure it was my first trail race. Yeah, first trail race, definitely my first ultra marathon was a 24-hour looped event, a timed event around a lake, a 2-mile loop. And just signed up for that on trail, fell in love, did it, and just was blown away by the ultra world. It was captivating and captured my soul, man. It's got me.
And if my memory serves me correctly, that was like 2018?
Yes, 2018. That's right.
And so, I mean, I would like to say, like, anything before COVID, I like to think that it was like the time before ultra was cool. Like, obviously ultra has taken off, especially since COVID and backyard ultras and people doing all these virtual events. And I mean, I just think about my endurance background. Like I was doing Ironmans in 2008, 2009, all the way up to 2016, 17. And I have to say that like, I never knew that there was like an ultra scene. I never knew that there was, I don't know if it's a product of where I live or just that I wasn't seeking them out, but it blows my mind now when I talk to people. I was just out on the West Coast in Oregon for Spike Camp, and talking to people that have been doing this for so long, or like I'll get on someone's ultra sign up page when I'm stalking them out, and I'll see that like they did a 50K like 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's especially like, I don't know if you realize that, but like you can put that badge of honor on you. Like you did ultras before it was cool. And the other thing that I want to say is in this little loop 24-hour, you happen to go 100 miles.
I did 100 miles in 23 hours and 13 minutes, and I actually won the race too overall. And I got lucky. What's funny is like you mentioned this small ultra world that a lot of people don't know. So before I got into the Army, I raced cars. I did like autocross, I did time trials, all that. I did One Lap of America, if anyone's familiar with that, like Cannonball Run from back the Burt Reynolds movie, that kind of thing, kind of. And in my autocrossing, one of my competitors and friends, his dad was Ray Krolowitz. And for those that don't know, Ray Krolowitz is kind of an ultra legend. He's held many world records. He's a big deal in like the ultra scene. And I knew Ray as the timing clock, because like every time we'd go to a racetrack, he'd have a stopwatch and he'd be timing his son, and he'd be like to the thousandth of a second as accurate as the timing clock was, like perfect. And I knew him as that. And like every morning at the track, he'd be out running, like on the racetrack before they started the event. He'd be out running on the track and like, oh, there's Crazy Ray running. And that's all I knew. Like that was it. But then like come find later, and then now I know his prowess in the ultra world and this small scene and community. It's crazy. Yeah, people don't know about this sport.
Well, so once you knock that out, I mean, I feel like runners go, or now being in the ultra scene for almost 3 years, there's a lot of people that do one and done, and
Right.
there's a lot of people that start to do one and then they realize never again.
Yeah.
How was it coming out of there? What did you learn from that first experience? Because like I said, I really want the audience to understand, because I think it's sometimes hard for beginners to realize that when you hear us talking about 100-milers and you hear us up there and like, it seems like we got this in the bag and like we're doing this very easily, but we all started somewhere and we've all had our bumps, and we're going to talk about some of ours. But what was the mindset at, say, 20 hours or even at 50 miles? And you're like, I could keep going and I could maybe get to, like, when did you believe that maybe you could get, there's no way that you went into that race thinking that I'm going to crush 100 miles in 24 hours in my first ultra, right?
No way.
Right.
No. So like my goal leading up to this race was 50 miles. That's what I had trained for, was to run a 50-mile ultra in 24 hours. Prior to this race, the furthest I had ever run was I did a marathon on trail, and this was just a training run. It wasn't a race. My furthest race I had ever done was a half marathon, and that was on road. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know what to expect. So I trained for 50 miles, and then I think maybe 2 weeks before the race, I got a Facebook message from Ray Krolowitz, and he said, hey, you could just go for 100 miles. It's only a 14-minute pace. And that kind of put a burden, like a little seed in my ear or whatever. I'm totally mixing up my analogies now, whatever. But it planted a seed that this, hey, maybe is this possible? Like, I don't know. Like, it was the naivete of it all that was so beautiful, because I didn't know what to expect. I had no clue. And so I go in thinking, okay, 14:24 gets me to 100 miles in 24 hours. So I started this race with a secret goal that only my wife knew, of 100 miles. Like, nobody else knew this. I didn't tell anyone. And so I start the race. I'm running with a guy, Michael, who was from South Carolina, and we ran the first 20-ish miles together. And he used to be an ultra runner, like the team Ultra, ALTRA, the shoe company. And so we ran together, and we were crushing like 9-minute miles for like just the first 20 miles, just crushing it. And at some point it was like maybe mile 40, him and I separated, and like he kind of backed off a little bit, and I just kept going. I wasn't still doing 9-minute miles at this point, but I was still moving at a pretty, decent pace. Just again, not knowing. I think it was that not knowing is what led me to be so successful, because I didn't have that fear in my mind of like, oh, I know it's going to get so tough at this point, or I know that I'm not going to be able to do this. It was just like, well, hey, let's see what happens. and it just turned out really well. I think it was mile 72 or 74 of this race, though, is when like I started getting this incredible shin pain in both of my shins, to where I thought that my shins were going to break in half and I was going to be going on nubs, like with no feet. Like, it was that painful. Like I was sure I was causing myself to have, stress fractures, something. It was bad. But I talked to the physical therapist. At this point I started cramping, and this race had a physical therapist on staff there for this event, because this was like a 7-day event as well. People could run, sorry, not 7. People could run anywhere from 6 hours up to 96 hours. Oh, wow. So they had a physical therapist. And so like I went and saw her. She worked on me for a good 25 minutes. I think I actually fell asleep on the table while she was doing this. And then I just kept going, and I kept, walking and running and walking and running and walking and running. And I got to 100 miles, and I had time to go probably run another lap, maybe 1.5 laps, something like that. But I hit my goal of 100, and I was like, I'm done. I'm just going to stop. And so I walked across that finish line, got my buckle, and I was done. But it certainly wasn't easy. During the race, I had crazy pain. I cramped. I was taking in way too much salt because I didn't know. I was taking like a salt pill, like 1 or 2 salt pills, like every hour. I was taking naproxen, like ibuprofen, naproxen, basically, because I didn't know any better. And so like I was retaining all of this sodium. My ankles were incredibly swollen. And after this race, I paid for it. Like, I trained for 50 and I ran 100. And so I didn't run again for 3 weeks. Wow. And then when I tell you this part, I'm not exaggerating. My wife will confirm it. I could not stand up and pee myself without my wife holding my shoulders, because like I was like so unbalanced. I was going to fall over. Like she had to hold my shoulders like I could piss in the toilet. Like,
well, I mean,
for 3 days.
I think that's a product of, like you said, ignorance is bliss, but also a product of the time in 2018. I mean, it wasn't as easy to just hop online and find information about nutrition, or the scene wasn't big enough where you could just bump into an ultra runner and be like, hey, how much sodium you taking?
Yeah, exactly. Or don't take ibuprofen or naproxen, you know, that wasn't.
So even after all that, even after the 3 weeks, you know, your wife's helping you take a leak, like you were still ready for more?
Yeah. So that was June of 2018. And then I ran the Cloudland Canyon 50K, I think was my next race, which I believe was February of 2019. That was my next ultra marathon. So 50-kilometer race. And I did really well on that one too. But no, I was hooked. Like after that, I was just like, when can I get back running? When can I get back running? And I wanted to keep training, and I was just in love with the scene. Going
back to the Billy Yang film, which, I mean, his videos are epic, and he's now like Jeff Peltier is coming through with, I think, like taking the torch from him on these awesome, epic videos of races. You've done Leadville. That video must have made Leadville pretty dope to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That was pretty special to do that race and to kind of come full circle almost, you know. That was my fourth 100-mile race at the time. It was Leadville. And it was definitely special. There's, you know, some things about that race that I would change if I was the race director myself. But it's the history of that race is what makes it so special. The course itself is pretty, but it's not spectacular. Like it's a neat course, but it's the history of that race. It was, for me, it was such a special moment because of like, that's kind of what got me into trail running, was watching that film of that race, and then getting to do it was pretty cool.
Did you get in the lotto?
I did not. So I did not get in the lottery. And then through my YouTube channel, one of my subscribers reached out to me through Instagram. I'd never met him before, never talked to him before in my life. And he said, hey, I saw you missed the lottery. I ran the race last year, and I also have some volunteer hours that I'm not going to run this year. I'd like to donate my volunteer hours to you.
Amazing.
And so he donated the volunteer hours to me, and then emailed the race director and said, hey, I donated my hours to him, and they put me in the race because I had enough hours to get me in.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was insane. I was so grateful for him to do that.
You know, it brings justice to humanity when things like that happen, and you're like, wow, I didn't even know there was people out there like that. And that's because, I mean, you mentioned there's some things that you would change, and I'm sure we can say that about every race. And
absolutely.
I missed a lotto this year, and I definitely wore my heart on my sleeve a little bit. And I had some people DM me and be like, you've missed lottos before and you've never been so upset. And I personally hate gatekeeping. And the whole, like, if you're a lifetime gym member, you're kind of in already, like all of those things. But people said the same thing to me. They're like, Brad, it's not that epic. Like, why are you so upset? And I'm like, one, the history, as you mentioned, but also two, being a school teacher, it aligns with everything. Like, I take my family on a big trip. We're going to Never Summer now instead, but like, and then it fits my strengths. I mean, I'm not known for being a big climber here on Long Island on a flat island. Like, from what I understand, the first couple of miles are pretty runnable. And then you have the big climb up and over Hope Pass twice, which I can grind. But it was also a nice course to fit some of my strengths. And I was kind of upset. And then, you know, maybe a week or two later, I was like, it is what, there's plenty of beautiful races out there.
Yeah, 100%. There's so many great races, or even just doing an adventure on your own too. I mean, I really enjoy doing adventure runs.
Yeah.
Just not a race, just get out and enjoy being in nature. Like, that's amazing.
That was my next question for you too, is like, because you mentioned doing things outside of quote specific ultra races, and how you did this thing with your buddies, and you know, now you're doing races. I was going to ask you, like, for me, I'll never forget when I did rim to rim to rim with my buddies. And I've hiked sections of the Northeast Appalachian Trail up here. And, you know, those are just as rewarding. What's like an adventure for you that really stands out that, you know, people in that area, or, people could consider doing that was just really awesome for you?
One that I would highly recommend to anyone is SCAR, the Smoky Challenge Adventure Run. Okay. And so that runs the entire length of the Appalachian Trail through the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And so it's 72 or 74 miles.
Okay.
And you can either run it northbound or southbound, but it is incredibly beautiful. Like, it's just, you go up to over 6,000 feet in the Smokies. So you have the evergreens, you have just beautiful, rugged trail. Like, this is, even though it's the Appalachian Trail, it's not, Colorado carpet like they call it here. It is technical. There's so many rocks and roots.
That's my style.
It is very, very rugged, and I loved it. It was amazing.
Any moonshine stills out there?
I didn't see any, but there are some events that they do. Pitchell is one of them, where rumor has it the way they start that is at midnight when there's like a full moon and you have to like take a shot of moonshine and then you go run this race. Like, it's not a race, it's a fat ass basically, or an adventure run. But yeah, that's pretty cool. But no, SCAR, definitely recommend it. It is challenging. It's 18,000 feet of elevation gain in 72 miles. So it feels like a 100-mile race. It's very... So if you start at Fontana Dam, you have to go 32 miles before you could see anybody. That's the nearest access point, unless somebody was to hike in. And so you're out there for a long time alone, and it's epic. And the weather in the Smokies, you'll get hailstorms, lightning storms. It's crazy, but it is such an adventure.
Going back to that first race and then going all the way up to Leadville, how did your approach to training change or evolve, if it even did? Like, did you, obviously you kind of were ignorant and you kind of probably just ran for that first one, but then as you went up through, you said 4 100-milers, did anything change from race to race? Were you learning things race to race? I mean, I have 2 under my belt and I still feel like I'm so far away from knowing my ass from my elbow when it comes to this stuff. And that's kind of the beauty, especially with course specificity. Every race is very different, but how has your training kind of evolved, and how are you, I know you're going through injury, which we're going to talk about, but through that time of first 100 all the way up to fourth 100, did you bring in coaches, or did you focus on strength or less strength? Did you really need to change your nutrition? How did it really evolve over that time?
Yeah, it evolved a lot. So like you said, for the first one, it was basically what would somebody do for a marathon, and then just do a little bit more, So it was very much fly by the seat of your pants. Maybe I found a generic 50K plan and kind of followed that, because like I said, I was training for 50 miles. And then after that race, I did learn a lot, and I knew I wanted to run 100 miles again. So I started training. I was self-coached at that point. I was coaching myself. I was really into vert and elevation gain back then. So, I did races like the Barkley Fall Classic. I did that twice. I did the Georgia Death Race. So these are very difficult East Coast races with lots of elevation gain. So I was never a really high volume guy. Like, I was probably getting at most 45 miles, maybe 50 every once in a while. But I was getting 10 to 15,000 feet of elevation gain per week.
Wow.
And so and some of that was manufactured on a treadmill. I was the guy that I had a 12% incline treadmill, but I put it up on blocks in the front. So I did the math and figured it out. And
I'm right there. I think I'm so close to doing that, dude. I am, because mine goes to 12
you got
and a
to,
half.
man.
I'm thinking like for UTMB, like.
Yeah. Oh, especially for UTMB. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Especially where you live. Because I know, like I said, I just listened to that episode with you and your wife, and you said that for you, like, getting 5,000 feet in a week is like tough, dude, because that takes a lot of work.
Enormous week.
Yes. Like and that's like, for UTMB, you got to need a little more.
That is another reason why I'm coming out to Northern Colorado for a couple of weeks too. Cause I know that's going to be pretty close to peak weeks and things like that.
Yeah, that'd be great. But no, I did end up bringing on some coaches. I worked with Vert.Run for probably 3.5, maybe 4 years.
Okay.
And so they're like a monthly subscription where they have like plans that are designed by professional trail runners, and then they sort of get customized to people a little bit. And so that worked out great. They're a great company. They've done amazing things. They now work with you. They're actually the official coaches of UTMB, I believe. They design specific plans for that. So that worked out phenomenally, and that's what I used to train all the way up through Leadville, and even my fifth 100 miler, which was the No Business 100 last year, no, 2023. Yes, 2023 was my last. So it was 2 months after Leadville, I ran the No Business 100. And so I was training with them for both of those races. And that helped me be consistent, bringing on a coach, just having somebody that could kind of help you be a little accountable and design a plan for you. And it was, I think that was a big step up in my overall training.
Yeah, myself, I've self-coached, I've had a coach, and I coach athletes. I'm always curious to ask other people, because you are also a coach. Yep. Now you've been coached. What do you think? Like, does everyone need a coach? What are the simple pros and cons of having a coach? How have they helped you? And, when somebody emails you and they say, "Hey, I'm thinking about coaching. I'm thinking about bringing you on as a coach." Like, why do I want to do that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's one that, like, I am a coach, you're a coach, but no, I don't think everybody needs a coach. I think there's plenty of people out there that can train themselves adequately, and they can, it depends on their goals, what they want to do. Certainly anybody can go out and run. You don't need a coach. Can anybody benefit from a coach? 100%. Absolutely. There's so many things that a coach does other than just design a plan. Like, it's truly like my athletes. I know my athletes, I know about their lives, their work schedules, their kids, if they have sporting events, because they might need to change up the plan. And like on the fly, maybe they get sick. They can send me a text message. I can change up that plan. Because a lot of times when someone is self-coached, I did this myself when I was self-coached. If I got sick, let's say I was out for 5 days with a cold and fever, I would pick my plan up right where I left off. Doesn't matter if I miss 5 days, I would pick it right back up where I left off. Don't care. And that's horrible. Like, you're just going to get yourself injured. And so having someone that is knowledgeable in those things, like, all right, well, you were out these so many days, we need to back it off a little bit, go through a slow progression again, make sure your body's ready to train, and then, prevent you from getting injured. There's so much. They can help with nutrition, help you dial in and help you know how to test different nutrition products, sweat test to know what kind of sodium content you're losing, to know how much you're taking in, how much different fluids you need to intake. Right. There's so much. The strength training aspect of it is huge. You ask any runner out there, they'll probably tell you that they think strength training is pointless and not good for runners. I fully disagree with that. I think strength training is incredibly important, and everyone should strength train. But there's just so many different benefits to a coach. And I think the biggest thing is just having someone to hold you accountable for the workouts, to look at the data to see if you're doing the workouts right. Because a lot of people will go and do let's just say a 4 by 6 minute, like, uphill workout, and they're not running at the right intensity. They're not running fast enough, or they're running too fast. And it's like, they're not getting the right muscular adaptations that they need out of this workout because they're doing it either too fast or too slow. And the coach can help you with that.
I feel like, too, different people need coaches for different reasons.
Yes,
which
absolutely.
Can make it hard. Like, I needed a coach because I like feeling like somebody's on my team. When when your friends are telling you you're crazy, or your wife is telling you you're crazy, at least just having one person that believes in you, like a coach should, I think is really, really good. And like you said, walking me off the ledge. Like, I just had an athlete come off a 5-week ankle roll, and I gave him his first week back, and he was like, "I think you sent me the wrong plan." I was like, "No, dude, no, I didn't." Like, because they don't know that. And then also, too, I need a coach because I'm an overthinker, so I tend to overanalyze things and bring extra stress to myself, which is unneeded when you get up to these peak weeks for hundreds. And I realized that in my second 100 going into Javelina, where I self-coached myself, just not having to think about what my workout was, like just having trust in my coach and just waking up every day and doing the work and knowing that if I did the work, I was going to be okay. I think that is incredible. But like you mentioned, for some people, it's an incremental change. It's the difference between, this weighted shoe and a super shoe. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But can everybody benefit even in a small incremental way? But I think so. And I tend to always tell people, maybe a coach when you go up in a new distance, or if you're racing in a terrain or some sort of climate that you're not used to, you might want to bring somebody in for that experience. Like I went back and forth with a guy when I first started coaching. I wasn't really prepared yet for coaching 100K. I just didn't think I wasn't ready for that. And I'm not just going to like take money from, I want to make sure I'm adding value. And then he was like, I'm signing up for Grindstone and you've done that course. And I know that you did so much. I know you know every inch of that course, and I'm willing to pay for your services just to have that experience in my corner.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Like I didn't even realize that value of just simple, basic experience that you can bring. And I've seen people knock like every influencer's a coach now and all this thing. And I think people really downgrade the value of just having someone on your team, having someone that's been there, experienced it, blown their feet up, sucked down too much salt. And, that's really, it's a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, having a coach that has firsthand knowledge of a specific event that you're doing is a huge benefit. I mean, so my coaches for Leadville had not done the race. One of them had paced the race before. But then one of my crew, the guy that actually donated the hours to me, he crewed me, and he had done the race twice, once DNF'd, once finished it, but he had a lot of experience on that course. And so his firsthand knowledge of the course and like what to expect was invaluable. Like it's so important.
Yeah. And I mean, I helped this guy through Grindstone, and he had a great race. And there were things that I was able to tell him about aid stations, about certain exposures on the course, like just little things that I was able to tell him that I think really was a benefit that, like even the most professional coach probably couldn't have helped him with. And I think that's always a benefit. So I'm glad that you're coaching, and I'm glad that you also get coached. I tried with Javelina. It didn't work out. And then I was like, I know that I need to bring on somebody for UTMB, mostly because I'm intimidated. I don't want to worry about it, and I want to just get there. There was a feeling about canyons when I got to canyons, and I knew I stood on the start line and was like, I'm fucking ready. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Where I didn't have that fire in my stomach. I knew that I was going to be okay for Javelina, but I just the feeling of not knowing, was big. And I will not have that same for UTMB. When I get to UTMB, it's going to be one way or the other. It's going to be, I self-sabotage and I didn't do the work, and this is going to be sketchy, or we're getting that damn line.
Yeah.
Another thing. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I think that's another big aspect of a coach as well, is just that confidence. Like you said, having someone that believes in you, but not just believes in you because like it makes you feel good or it's because it's their job, but because they genuinely know you've done the training. As long as the athlete does the training and does the work, the hard work, they know that their athlete has the skills and the training to conquer that race, to finish it.
Yeah.
And that's important because I think a lot of people nowadays, there's so many people getting into the ultra world, and I think a lot of them start these races with a mindset that's not confident. They're like, oh, I'm just going to give it my best. I'm just going to see what happens. And like, that's not me. Like I'm like you and we've talked about this. Like I'm the type, I won't speak for you. I'm the type, when I toe the line of a start race, I know that I'm going to finish that race unless I have a traumatic injury that takes me out.
Yep.
That's the only thing. Like I will finish this race or you're going to have to pull me from it. That's my mindset.
Another thing that we have in common, and I think there should be a separate category for this in races, we're parents. We are regular. You're in your 40s now. How's it? 40s haven't been as good to you as they've been to me.
No, 40s are the crap.
But I believe I've heard you say, and we've probably spoke about this, your wife also a runner.
She's an ultra runner, right?
And my wife an ultra runner as well. I have 2 kids. I'm not as gutsy and ballsy as you to have as many as you have. How do you manage training with a spouse? Forget the family side and the kids aside. With a spouse that's also a runner, because my wife and I, we've shot ourselves in the foot early on. Like let's do the same race. And then we realized we both have Sunday long runs and we both have Saturday back-to-back runs. Is it something where you guys will like plan out a race or plan out a season and you'll have your A race and she'll have her A race? Or is it you like to train in the mornings and she likes to train in the afternoon, so that just works out? How do you manage the work-life balance of being dad, being husband, but then also having somebody else that's just as crazy as you that wants to get out there for 5-6 hours on a Saturday.
Yeah. I think the main thing is communication. Like that's the biggest thing. You and your spouse have to communicate and be on the same page. Right. So for us, I mean, with me, obviously I've been injured for the last year or more now. So I haven't really been training, running that is, but when I was, and when my wife was training, we would, at the beginning of a year or even before the beginning of the year, because race lotteries open up so much earlier now, and we would sit down with a calendar. My wife likes a paper calendar. I like my phone. So she'd have her paper calendar. I'd have my phone, and we'd be like, all right, I'm interested in this race, and this race. So like, well, I'm interested in this race and this race and this race, and look at the dates when they line up. We would try to not pick races that were in the same season, or at least in the same month. Because like you and your wife discussed on your episode, was that you don't want to be peaking the same time somebody else is peaking, because that training volume is just, it's not going to work. I mean, right. Maybe if you were both single, or not single, sorry, didn't have kids, right, it would work. But with kids, it just doesn't, it doesn't work. And I'm like you. I hate getting up and running in the morning. I am not a morning runner. So right. I like to run in the middle of the afternoon, or like typically in the middle of the afternoon, sometime between like 2 and 4 is kind of like my when I like to go. My wife will do mornings and she doesn't mind it. But we're flexible, and I think, and I realize I am blessed, and I work from home. I work remotely, and I have the flexibility to flex my schedule as I want. So I have that benefit of being able to run during the day. But a lot of people don't have that. So if you're on the same page with your spouse, your partner, communicate. And if you have to split long runs, we would do that. Like I'd be like, all right, well, Saturday's my long run day, Sunday's yours. Yeah. Like that. So Saturday I'd be out for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. Sunday she'd be doing the same thing. And so I'd be home with the kids, and then maybe I might do an hour run on the treadmill so that I can be home with the kids, kind of thing. And you've got to just be able to be flexible and think about it from a perspective of, you're training for your race. What do you want to do? Well, now your partner wants to do that too. So you got to be supportive of them.
Yeah. And I agree 100%. And you heard Tara and I talk, communication is very important, and we are blessed that she loves getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. That winds her clock.
Right.
So it's
no way.
We have our routine. I get up, I do breakfast with the kids, and she gets back, and I drink my coffee super slow. And yeah, I tend to be more of an afternoon, which like the thought that UTMB starts at 6 p.m. just is
right.
Besides the fact that I know that I have to do 2 full nights, it's just just makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. One of the first time I ever did like an afternoon race was the Disney Wine and Dine. And it started at like 10 p.m., half marathon. And then Epcot was open from 11 to 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And it was just for the racers. And at that time I was probably like a 2:30 half marathon kind of guy. And, I ended up going like 2 hours.
That's awesome.
And Tara's like, we had just started dating, and she's like, I thought you said you're 2:30. And I'm like, we just started dating, so I won't go too much into this, but I have like a really nervous stomach in the morning. So when I run before 10 a.m., my stomach is just in knots. That's just what I learned to live with. So going in and just feeling fed, feeling refreshed, having an afternoon coffee, I was like, full send.
That's awesome.
We've teased you being injured a couple times, and I remember when we first spoke in October, you were like deep in it. And I think even going back to the ankle roll conversation that we had early about your positivity, I think if you can take a hip replacement and turn it into a positive experience or an educational experience, I think I want to give credit. You've done an incredible job, and I don't know how many nights you've cried yourself to sleep. I'm sure there's been a couple of them, but you've done a very, very good job of, using your experience to help and educate others through your YouTube channel. And just, I'm sure there's been people that have messaged you and DM'd you. And to give the short story about that, from my research and remember talking to you in October, we're pretty much at about a year when you realized that things weren't right. And I caught a podcast of you on Fit Over 40,
Yep.
And I think you made a really, really good point about knowing the difference between when you're hurt and something is not right and just, onset muscle fatigue.
Right.
And
Yes.
knowing your limits and more, I think I more want to hear you repeat that again for my listeners on how important it is for us as ultra runners to not only know the difference between I'm screwed here and there's something really wrong, but also putting your ego aside and going to the freaking doctor when it's time to go to the doctor. And I'm really saying that to myself. I mean, I probably should go to the doctor more, and I tend to fight through things and deal with things that end up getting worse. But what was the thing that made you initially say, "Shit, this is it. Like I gotta go to the doctor."
Yeah. Yeah. So December of 23 is when I first had like an injury in the gym working out, and like kind of it felt like a pulled muscle, or maybe I thought it might've been like a hernia. So, I was stubborn, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to kind of take it easy for a little bit. And so I didn't see any doctors. February came around. I did a speed workout on the treadmill. And after that speed workout, I was limping through the house. I was sitting on the couch in a lot of pain. And prior to this, on my long runs, when I would get over like 2.5 hours, I would start like coughing a little bit because, I'm at altitude, and I would do a lot of my runs at 9,000 to 10,000 feet. So I would be at altitude and start coughing a bit. And I noticed like when I was coughing, I was getting a lot of pain in like my abdomen, like my groin area. And I'd be like doubled over in pain. And then so after this speed workout on the treadmill, the limping and just the pain sitting on the couch was very significant. I knew that this wasn't just like sore muscles. This wasn't like a muscle tear. Like something was wrong. And I didn't know what, but I knew that something in my body was not right. And so I was like, well, I need to go see a doctor. So I went to an urgent care facility. You make it sound like I'm this guy that goes to the doctor every year. I'm not. Like I was pretty much the guy that before this, I hadn't been to a doctor and I don't even know when, a long time. So I didn't even have a primary care physician. So I went to an urgent care, saw them, told them what I was experiencing. They sent me for an ultrasound to see if I had a hernia. I did not. So then we were trying to figure out what else it could be, started looking at doing x-rays. And then I requested and was pretty adamant about getting an MRI. And I finally got an MRI, and I think it was end of February or March of 24. And that's when I found out I had a torn labrum in my left hip. And I knew what that entailed because my wife had a torn labrum and a labral repair back in 2021. So I knew what to expect. So that kind of helped ease my mind a little bit. But through all that process, I started seeing surgeons for a labral repair, found a surgeon in Denver, and he noticed on the x-rays and then the MRI that I also had hip dysplasia, and that if he had gone through and repaired my labrum, that the hip dysplasia would have destroyed the labral reconstruction in probably 2 years because it was pretty significant hip dysplasia. So that led me with either getting a periacetibular osteotomy, which they cut your pelvis in 3 places, move it, put screws in your body to hold the pelvis in place till it heals. And that takes like a year. You're like on crutches for like 2 or 3 months, like no weight bearing on the leg. Or I could get a hip replacement. And I was like, sign me up for the hip replacement. I'm not going through that PAO. That sounds atrocious. And I've heard great things about hip replacements, runners getting, being able to run. But I really, you mentioned the whole like knowing your body and like knowing the difference between pain and discomfort, or like acute pain versus muscle soreness. And I truly credit that to my ultra running experience, because when you run ultras, you really do become intimately aware of your body. Every little ache that you get, you feel something, and you when you do it long enough, you experience so many different injuries along the way, or niggles, or things that just flare up. And so you get to learn what tendinitis feels like. You get to learn what an ankle roll feels like, or a strained hamstring feels like. You get to learn these things, and it teaches you about your body and how you react to pain. And I knew that this was more than just an injury that could heal in like 3-4 weeks of rest. This was going to be something that was bad. And that's why I started seeing the doctors. And I fully credit, like, I don't know how much you want to get into the story, but I fully credit like my ability to do this podcast right now and be alive to ultra running. Because after my surgery, I had blood clots. I got a blood clot in my leg and it traveled to my lungs. I had pulmonary embolism. And I went to the surgeon, told him all of my symptoms that I was having that morning, the physician's assistant. And he was like, yeah, let's keep an eye on this for like 2 weeks. And if you're still having these feelings, we'll send you for a chest CT scan. That same night, I was like, something is wrong. I know my body. Something is wrong. I went to the ER, and that's when we found the pulmonary embolisms. And had I not known my body so well, I very well could have had a severe PE and died. So I credit that to me knowing my body and from ultras. So I'm very grateful for the sport and what I've learned through it.
Yeah, I mean, PEs they'll knock you down.
Yeah.
They are not to be messed. Now, are you on blood thinners for those?
I am. I'm on blood thinners right now. And that's the other kind of like scary thing for me as like in a mountain. I love to be in the mountains. I want to go up high, 10, 12, 13, 14,000 feet and run and like do these cool adventures. Yeah, that's the thing is like if I fall and hit my head, I mean, I could have internal bleeding and not even know it and like die before I got back to the trailhead. So it's like, can't really do that right now.
Was the PE a direct result of the injuries that you were having, or was that just a separate freak occurrence?
It was related
are you on blood thinners indefinitely now?
I don't know. It was related to the surgery. So anytime you have a major surgery, blood clots are always a very high probability. I do have a family history of pulmonary embolism. I had a grandfather and a great-grandfather that died of PE. Wow. So I'm on blood thinners now, and I need to come off of them at some point in the future and go see a hematologist to do some blood work and see if I will be on these for the rest of my life, possibly just with my family history. Right. So it's certainly like my dad takes, I think, aspirin daily for that reason. And if that's enough, that'd be fantastic. But yeah, it's still a lot remains to be seen.
Your surgery was in September, correct?
September of 2024.
Yeah. So this whole process is now 1.25 years over.
Well, 6 months since surgery.
6 months in surgery, but still like no running really for a year.
Yeah. March 26 was my last run, March 26 of 2024. And then I ran again in, I think December was my first run after surgery, December or January.
And you had a 200 on the schedule?
I did. I was supposed to do a 200-mile race in September of last year, actually. So the same month I had my surgery, I was supposed to run the Sangre de Cristo 200 here in the Colorado Mountains.
I don't know how you made it out of there.
Yeah.
I've been so, like I said, I'm not a negative person. I'm a very positive person, but like, dude, that's a long time. I give you so much credit, man.
Like, I mean, I am a positive person, and I feel like I've dealt with it pretty well. But there's certainly been times where, I mean, I drank a lot more. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I drank a lot at night. Sometimes I would be putting back 2-3 doubles of whiskey, just because I was depressed. I couldn't run. I could work out still. I could be in the gym. I could lift, and I was able to cycle up until like the last month before the surgery. Then I couldn't even cycle. It was just too painful.
Not to mention, it's your job.
Yeah, I mean, like. Yeah, I love running, and that was a big thing.
But run reviews and shoe
my
reviews
whole
and
YouTube
gear
channel,
reviews.
Yeah, it's built on that. It's like that's what it is, and so that was massive, and that was definitely in my head massively of like, what am I going to do? How am I going to pivot this channel and stay afloat? And
if you're Euro size 46, you can send them out here, and I'll run in them for you a little bit, and I'll let you know how they were.
Like looking back at it, like there's definitely been some positives that have come out of my hip journey. And like one of them is the YouTube channel, because my hip video now has over like right at 520,000 views on it, which is the most any video I've ever made. And there's been thousands of people, literally thousands, that have like commented or DM'd me and said, thank you so much for making this video. It is like I've been terrified of getting my hip replaced because of X, Y, and Z. And seeing you go through it and being real, like it's been so inspirational. It's given me the courage to do it. And like, there's so many videos out there where it's like your typical influencer that's only going to show you the good and like not the bad, but I show the bad, and I show it pretty dang real in that video. And I think a lot of people resonated with that and appreciate that. And so that has been very awesome to hear that my journey has inspired other people to like have the confidence to get that surgery and to go through and know their life's not over.
Yeah.
Like I know my life's not over. I'm hopefully going to run again. I am running. I'm doing, small runs now. Mm-hmm. I did have a little bit of a scare this week. I actually had to go see my surgeon today because I thought I might have like had something come loose because I've been in a lot of pain the last 2 days. But we took x-rays, everything's fine. He thinks it's just some tendonitis in the hip flexors and the abductors that's causing some pretty significant pain right now in that area. So I got to take it easy. I was going too hard, too quick.
Come on, coach.
I know, right?
We're brands pretty receptive. Cause I mean, I'm sure some of the stuff you were reviewing in the early days, you were buying everything, but I'm sure there's been some stuff that gets sent your way.
Oh yeah.
Are they still calling, or, after a while, you're gonna have to rebuild a lot of relationships when you really get back to running regularly? So
luckily, I've been working with brands since she's probably 2021 on my channel, and it was going so well before the injury. Like, I mean, just, oh my gosh, so amazing, the brand relationships I had. And some of those, I couldn't run. I couldn't test their products. And so, when I tell them that, hey, I'm got to have this surgery, I'm not going to be running for probably 6 months to 9 months, maybe, hopefully in the future we can work together kind of thing. And they're like, oh, sorry to hear that. And it's like, well, there's other YouTubers out there. There's other influencers that then get that product. And so there's other people that are now filling that role. And so I've been lucky enough to reestablish the relationship with Solomon. I've got a great relationship with them. They just sent me a lot of stuff to test. Hoka's been great. Kornhaus, Suunto, these brands have been still working with me. Even during like when I wasn't running, I was reviewing watches, and the way I was doing that, I was very transparent. I told everybody in my videos about this. Like my wife would wear the watch with a Kornhaus or some other watch, and I would get that GPS accuracy data or her heart rate accuracy data and compare it. But then I would do the technical reviews of everything else. It would be nice. That. So it worked out great, and those reviews have done really well. So good. I kind of found a way to pivot a little bit for some of those things.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's been there's still some work to do with some other brands.
Can you even start to think about racing again yet, or are you still in just trying to get one foot in front of the other, get back to consistency? Like when do you think we start setting goals again?
I don't know. Like I was literally just thinking this week or this past weekend, I actually met a viewer of my channel on the trail. I was running, and he's like, Steven, I was like, hey, what's up? We talked, and I was like, I'm thinking about, I might jump into the Cheyenne Mountain Trail race. That's a race here in the Springs in April. And they have like they have a 50K, but I was thinking maybe the 25K or even like just the 15K, like very small. And then this week I have this flare up where things get horrible, and I'm like, I got to step back. I'm going too quick. And so it's like, no, I really just can't. If I do a race this year, like I'd say it's probably a much higher likelihood that it's a gravel cycling race versus a running race. And I just need to focus on getting fully healed and healthy. And I'm grateful that I can get in the mountains still. I can still hike. I can still I've done the Manitou Incline 3 times now since the surgery. I can still do that, which is awesome to get out in nature. And I can still lift in the gym. And I just need to be grateful to be able to do those things and enjoy this season of life somehow.
Well, I mean, like I said, as somebody that started watching you in reviews and, following you now for a couple of years, and, you're more than a ultra runner and a YouTuber to me. Like, you're a good man and a good father and a good dad. Like, and I'm glad, like I said, you stayed positive. And as somebody that's gone through some dark times, it's been a breath of fresh air to see that. So I first and foremost, I appreciate and I want to thank you for just your positivity that you bring to the community. You're definitely additive to the community, even since before it was cool. So I will definitely leave show notes and stuff to the YouTube channel. I would be very, very hard pressed to say there's anybody that knows me that's never heard about you. So, I mean, maybe people can get down in the comments and be like, I'd never heard of Steven. So I can get some credit. But yeah, and many more conversations to come. And I'm super pumped on, we could talk for hours even about the Adventure Jogger. I'll leave that podcast link down there. You've had some awesome episodes since you took it over. And yeah, man, I just want to say thank you. And thanks for giving me the time tonight. And I look forward to you out on the trail.
Yeah, man, I appreciate those nice comments, and it means a lot, man. And appreciate you having me on and wanting to chat to somebody who's only running like 10 miles a week right now. So
we all got to start somewhere, right?
That's right.
All right, buddy. Have a great night.
You too.